Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business. Joining me today is Paula Allen, Global Leader, Research and Total Wellbeing for Morneau Shepell. Thanks for joining us today, Paula.
Oh, a pleasure, Mario.
Well, Paula, we've done this a few times over the last few months, talking about the company's mental health index. And my gosh, every time I talk to you, it seems that the topics seem to get worse and worse in terms of the negativity, right? The latest health score I saw is for the 12th straight month. It was a negative health score, lowest point right now. Can you tell me just, what you're seeing out there in terms of the mental health of Canadians these days? And it's obviously, needless to say, due to the COVID pandemic.
Right, and absolutely. I mean, I think putting in context what the COVID pandemic is, it's actually a trauma. Like, it meets the definition of trauma in terms of mental health. But where it's a little different than some traumas is that it's ongoing. Like, it's not an event that happens. It's not like, there's an issue that happens and then you move on, you kind of incorporate it, you get help if you need be. Yeah. All of the things that were traumatizing us back in March and April of last year, the change and uncertainty we still have now. So that makes it particularly difficult. And actually, one of our biggest risks at this point in time is just how long it's going on. Yeah. The fact that the mental health of working Canadians has declined and has stayed so low, the length of time we're experiencing it is making it much more difficult for us in terms of our experience and our long-term prognosis.
Do you think, it's interesting that you talk about the length of time, but in terms of something of this level, say an event or a situation, lasting this period of time, it's got to be unprecedented, probably in all our lifetimes, right? I think you maybe go back to the world wars as a possibility, the Depression, but in our lifetimes, I don't think anybody's ever experienced something of this magnitude over this length of time.
Yeah, this is definitely the defining moment of all of our lives. And you're quite right. There's many things that can come from this. I mean, it is something that is definitely a risk. There is a risk of it actually just essentially resetting our level of mental health for a long time to come. Mm-hmm. But there also is the opportunity to learn from this. I mean, we've been able to prioritize mental health, many of us, in the way that we haven't, at least in terms of consuming information and reading and hearing about it. But we also need to take action about it. We also need to make sure that we, might not have the connections that we did before in the way that we wanted them before. We see our isolation scores as quite significant, but they're actually lower now than they were in April. So we haven't rebuilt connections. And that is so essential to our mental health and well-being. And taking that action, if we do it, would build resilience.
Now, you mentioned isolation, and I think I saw in that report that the score for the isolation is the worst that it's been. What are the dangers, I guess, of prolonged isolation for people?
Well, not to be dramatic, but in its extreme, it is torturous. Like, when you think about punishment, a lot of it, a type of punishment is solitary confinement. So that's way at its end. Yeah. Like, when you think of just not being around people is punishing to the mind. And on the other side, more like your and my experiences, having connections with others, being able to talk, having a sense of belonging, that connection and belonging, that's how we're built as human beings. That's a big moderator to stress. And not having that is not only a mental health risk, but there's research that says it's a risk to your physical health, in particular, your immune system and your cardiovascular health.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I found interesting in the report was about Canadian managers of companies experiencing the greatest levels of mental distress right now. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the report found there?
Yeah, this is such an important point, Mario, because managers are so essential, particularly given a time of upheaval. When you think about what managers had to do in the very beginning of the pandemic in particular, they had to keep the business going. They had to make sure that people were working from home. They had to implement the health and safety protocols, deal with customer issues. It went on and on and on. And managers are dealing with the same disruption everybody else is, plus these additional things. So we're finding that managers are just burned out at this point. And for the first time ever, you know, their mental health is more compromised than non-managers as a result of these additional demands and strains. And they're also saying that, you know, their job has changed and they don't necessarily feel equipped to manage that change. So very important not to sort of take that group for granted, because I think that tends to be the way things work. But understand that they need to be supported, they need skills, but also they need to be encouraged for their own self-care.
And I guess that has a ripple down effect, doesn't it? In terms of the managers are feeling distress, sure as heck, the people that report to them will be even more so, right?
Without question, there's no question about it. I mean, managers are there as a support system for their employees, and if they're not feeling, you know, strong and supported, they can't support others. But the ripple effect is all over. It's definitely to their teams. It's sideways to their customers. It's rippling up in terms of business impact and also the risk of turnover. So there's no two ways about it. This is an issue that needs attention.
So what can be done there? Like, how can we build, you know, and I guess these are probably things that anybody can use, but how can we build resiliency in people, and why is that important, especially right now?
Well, there's a couple of things specifically for the managers. So for people overall, what's important in terms of resilience is, number one, to feel supported, to feel a sense of a purpose, to have those social connections and belonging, to make sure that you have some breaks in your mind, you know, that you're not just doing work and sleeping. Like, that's the pattern that many people have gotten into, and that's not good. That's a strain on your mind. I think as well, and this is for everyone also, but also more for managers, because we have found that managers are really impacted by stigma even more than non-managers. They're concerned about self-identifying and reaching out even to their peers. So that is something that can be addressed, because stigma is a result of culture, and we can actually do something about that. And the third thing is that there's very realistic additional strains that managers are having. And when we ask them, the number one thing is that they needed to feel better equipped in dealing with the mental health of their own teams. So they actually put that ahead of dealing with their own mental health. So training managers to deal with what they're seeing on a regular basis, and we find 4 out of 5 have had to deal with the mental health issue of an employee, at least one employee since this pandemic, and only 20% knew what to do, which is an additional strain on them, as well as not great for the employee.
True, yeah. One last thing, Paula. So, you know, whenever this thing is over, who knows, right? How difficult is it for people to rebound? You know, once you go down this kind of rabbit hole, you know, and 12 months of this and constant stress and depression and whatever, worry, anxiety, how long does it take to get out of that hole? Like when things supposedly, you know, get back to normal?
Oh, well, this is an answer nobody wants, but applies to so many things. It depends. I think overall, though, human beings, like our species, is very resilient. You know, we fight to recover, we fight for balance, we fight for control, we fight for connection, all of those things. But I would be remiss to say that it'll be sort of an immediate spring back. For some people, people have been doing very well. For some people, they've been able to focus on gratitude and what's within their control, and build new connections and patterns, and really adjust. It's not that they're not impacted, but those people, who have that social support and have built different and new ways to cope, will do a lot better than those who are very angry, very frustrated, consumed, just waiting and not doing anything. People who have had any number of compromises, and we've seen people even increase their drinking behavior and a number of things. Those maladaptive responses is going to make it a lot harder. So I think this is why we have to kind of support each other. And if you see somebody who's not in a good place, really encourage them to get help so they can recover quicker. Overall, as a society, I believe it will take quite some time.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thanks very much again, Paula, for joining us. And thanks for your insights on the report.
Always a pleasure, Mario. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was Paula Allen, who is Global Leader, Research and Total Wellbeing for Morneau Shepell. Thanks for joining us today. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business.